So requirements are developed in small pieces. Whenever it is needed, they'll just break up the requirements. If they feel that the story card or the feature cannot be delivered in one sprint, they'll break up into smaller chunks of requirements and write the smaller user stories. I'll take you to walk you through an example of what are user stories, what are epics and everything, so that you will understand it very much clearly by taking a real time example outside of IT industry, so that you will understand it more clearly. Okay. So these are the requirements are a communication problem in real time always, because either it is written requirements or verbal requirements, you will always have communication problem. So the business tells you something, you will understand, you have to document it, and you have to give the walkthrough to developers. And sometimes you may misinterpret, our business might not be able to articulate it well, but still we need to make sure that the requirements are communicated, documented properly. So agile scrum methodology is all about user stories. All the requirements are written in user stories. In from your daily tasks and your time to time, you will be daily talking about user stories only, and they'll become a part of your job and your life too if you are in a agile scrum environment. So user stories seek to combine the strengths of written and verbal communication where possible, supported by a picture. So you will talk to the business, communicate verbally, understand their problem, interpret the solution, and take the approval from them, and then written communication. You write them as a user story. You write the acceptance criteria to that. You write the requirements wherever possible. You support it by a picture by using different diagrams, and then get the approval for those. So user story is a combination of written and verbal communication with supporting pictures wherever necessary. So what is a user story? A concise written description of a piece of functionality that will be valuable to a user. So it is always based on a user perspective. So that is the reason why it is called a user story. This user stories might be users needs or product description, planning items, tokens for a conversation, mechanisms for differing a conversation. So these are all just interpretation of stories. It can be anything. Okay. So a user story should be detailed enough for the teams to start working on, to establish further details and clarifications at the time of development. And we use a particular word called acceptance criteria to establish further details and clarifications. So along with the user story, we'll have all the acceptance criteria to cover all the minute parts of the user story or feature, whatever we are going to implement. So this is an acronym. It comes from the Agile Scrum methodology books. INVEST is the acronym for a good user story. So INVEST stands for independent, negotiable, valuable, estimable, small, and testable. So user stories should be as independent as possible. So it should not be dependent on other story. So because if you are going with a story in the second sprint, and a story which it is dependent is going in sixth sprint, then you cannot really, you may implement this, you may write the code and deploy it, but you cannot really test it because it is dependent on a story which is going to be implemented in sprint 6. So it should be independent most of the time, and sometimes if the dependency is there, the sprint planning should be accordingly, so that the one which is dependent on another should be implemented first, then the dependent story will be implemented later. Okay. Negotiable. A user story is not a contract. Once it is defined means we should be able to change it, or we should be able to adapt the change and write the user story again before it is approved. So we cannot take it like, oh, if you have given this, it will not change. In waterfall model, you will be writing like 600, 700 or 1000 pages of document going for the approval, and once it is approved and locked, you cannot do anything. But here in user stories, it is always adaptable to change. If this user story is not correct, then you will stop going it into the next sprint. You will work on it again, you gather the requirements again, rewrite it, send it for approval, and push it for the next sprint. If it is intended for second sprint, and if you are unable to deliver it or any changes on that, you will push it to fourth sprint. And by the time fourth sprint comes, you should be able to document this again based on the newest or changed requirements. So this is negotiable and valuable. User stories should be valuable to the user or owner of the solution. They should be written in user language always. That's what I was telling before. So all the user stories will be in the user's perspective. So as a user, what I have to do, as a customer, what I have to do, as a manager, what I have to do. So all the user stories will be in user perspective, and they will bring some value to the user, and it helps him to accomplish something or other. Okay. Estimable. So user stories need to be possible to estimate. If you have a user story, let's say there is a user story to log into a screen like Gmail, let's say. As a user, I want to be able to log in into Gmail so that I can check my email. This is a like a generic template of a user story. We'll go into it in detail in the next slides. So this should be estimatable. So some people use different techniques called, some teams use a technique called planning poker, and some teams they'll use a technique called t-shirt sizes. Like if it is a small story, then they'll give the size of XS. If it is a big story, L or XL. So they should be estimatable. So some people use Fibonacci series like 1 2 4 8 16. So sorry, 1 2 3 5 8 and 13, so on, like Fibonacci series numbers, and those will be the work hours required to develop that. So in sprint planning sessions, when you are taking the stories into product backlog, so before the product before the sprint, before any sprint starts, as I was telling you in earlier sessions, we'll have a sprint planning session where we will decide which stories we are going to take into this next sprint, right? So in that planning session, we will sit together, the developers and QS will be estimating the effort. Like the developer say, if there are 3 developers, one developer might say it will take 4 days, one developer will say it will take 8 days. So if both are not agreeing, then Scrum Master will open up a debate, asks why does it take so much days, and ask this guy also, why does it take so much days for you? So they will come up with their explanation like, I need more unit testing for this is complex. And some guy says it is just only like few lines of code, it is already there. So based on the discussion, they will discuss, and maybe they'll go down with 4 or 8 or somewhere in between like 6 or 7 as well sometimes. And similarly, QA will also give their estimate. So based on the complexity of the story card, they'll decide how many work hours or days it will require to complete the testing on that user story. So that's where both of them. And after that, the Scrum Master combines the dev effort and QA effort and allocate a estimate on that story card. So if you have 10 people in the team and you have 10 days, 10 days of sprint, right? So if it is a 2-week sprint, you will have 5 days in each week, so 10 days, so 80 hours, 80 hours into 10 people. So there are total of 800 hours in the team, and these estimates should match the total hours, workable hours in the team, and they'll allocate so that many hours to each and every story card. And if we are out of hours, then we won't be able to take any more story cards into that sprint. So anything which is already DOR done also, they will be pushed to the next sprint. Okay. And next one is small. User stories should be small, not too small or not too big. Very too small means it will take more efforts from dev or QA team to write the test cases and do the deployment. If it is one line code also, he has to write it, and DevOps team has to take care of the deployment. The lead needs to check the code, and everything will be the same process for deployment of even small piece of code also. So we have to make sure that it will not be very small or too big that it cannot be completed in a sprint or not cannot be tested in a sprint. Scrum master and business analyst will take care of, or sometimes scrum master with product owner will take care of this. So don't worry about that. And yeah, you will be given the chunks of story cards, or sometimes based on your understanding also you can recommend you can recommend to your scrum master, saying that this is very big and we might need to break it up into small chunks of stories. Okay. And testable. So user stories need to be worded in a way that is testable, so not too subjective, and to provide clear details of how the story details will be tested. So sometimes it will be the responsibility of a BA to describe the scenarios also. Some scenarios will happen only if some options are selected or some options are not selected. We should be in a position to give those clear directions to the testing team, and also we can provide some sample data or sample scenarios also whenever required. But yeah, you will be working with the business to get it done, and they should be actually testable, should not be dependent on other story cards. If it is dependent, then yeah, we may have to ask the, not us actually. So the QA team will take care of, they'll have a lead or a manager, and they'll come to the scrum master, we discuss in a meeting and do what to do in the next sprint, or push it to the next sprint, or just hold it as we change the status to blocked and keep it for further testing in the upcoming sprints.